1995 was a great year for my family. Dad got a great job, and so we did what a lot of immigrant African families do when they have a little money: move to the suburbs. The public school we were zoned for wasn't quite suburban enough. In fact, it was in the hood. And Dad was obsessed with a good education. So we enrolled in private school. We could afford it now. The private school was really small, and they made us wear uniforms. Those polo shirts were scratchy and much more expensive than the Kmart clothes we'd grown accustomed to. Our Payless shoes got us made fun of, so we cried until my parents upgraded us to Reeboks, Nikes, and my personal favorite, Fila's. God bless the 90s. We took another step into suburbia and bought a minivan, a staple for middle-class 90s families. Except my parents bought one of those funny-looking sloped forehead Toyota minivans, the Previa. Why couldn't you just get a Caravan, we asked. That's what everyone else at school has. Ah, Dad would say. It's American. That transmission will last for 2 days. My parents were doing the American dream, but it stopped short of embracing American cars. Still, with a comfy 3-bedroom house in the burbs, 2 well-behaved boys who adored their little brother, a Christian education, and a minivan, my parents were ready to tackle their version of the American dream. Now you have everything you need to go to medical school, my dad would say. While my dad poured his time into work, my mother sort of took up her place as a suburban housewife, except an African version, one who wasn't really involved in PTA or carpools. Her new baby took up too much of her time, and when he was sleeping, she liked taking care of the house, watching Oprah, and talking on the phone in Swahili with her relatives. When the phone service came to wire the new line, my mom was introduced to another 90s luxury: caller ID. She bought the most expensive cordless phone with tons of buttons and the all-important ID screen. We apparently were too important to answer any random calls from random people. With the elections and the Olympics coming up, we bought a new TV. Ah, Dad would say, on Sunday, let's go to Sakat City. That's Circuit City. Translation. They always bought a new TV and ordered cable service during election season, as if a new TV and CNN would make a difference. They were not even citizens at this point. They couldn't even vote. We didn't mind election season because cable meant we'd get to watch Rugrats on Nickelodeon and sneak Mariah Carey videos on MTV. While 1995 saw us being like the Jeffersons and moving on up, 1996 was a different story. We traveled from Vegas to Oceanside for a funeral. It took place over a weekend, and my family decided to stay until Monday morning, the day before my 11th birthday. My dad woke us up at the reasonable hour of 3 a.m. Ah, wake up. You have to go to school. But we're still in California, we said. That's why we need to get a head start home. I'm not paying expensive tuition for you to miss school. We said our sleepy goodbyes to the bereaved family, and we climbed into the minivan to begin our journey home. My dad drove with my older brother on the passenger side. My mom and now 10-month-old little brother took the middle row. I, knowing my new role as the middle kid, happily took my place way in the back. Whatever, I prefer to be left alone, and I promptly fell asleep. In my sleep, I had a dream that had lots of screeching tires, and crunching metal, and a crying baby, and the smell of smoke, and repeated banging. I opened my eyes, and my dream was all too real. We had been in a really bad car accident. There was broken glass in my lap, and the minivan looked more like a crushed can of pinto beans than reliable transportation. Dad was banging on his window trying to break it because his door wouldn't open, but his hand kept getting wrapped up in the deflated airbag. Older brother seemed dazed and confused and just as trapped as my father. Baby brother and mom were nowhere to be found, their seats empty, as if they'd been in some sort of rapture. And I? Well, I was relatively fine. The familiar sound of my baby brother crying snapped me out of my initial confusion. I was on autopilot, not really caring about the sights, sounds, and smells. I just needed to get to my crying brother. I undid my seatbelt and climbed out of the van, not through an open door, but through a hole that had been gouged out of the side. While my dad looked fine, he definitely wasn't. The airbag punched him in the face. Older brother was almost crushed in the front passenger seat. Mom and little brother lay in a heap in the middle of the road, on the asphalt next to an overturned pickup truck, both of them crying out in pain, having been ejected at some point during the accident. I saw them moving. I heard them crying out, so I knew they were alive, but they were very, very far from okay. Then, a small flame appeared on the undercarriage of the overturned pickup truck. As the fire began to spread, I quickly scooped up my baby brother, not even thinking that something could be broken, and went and sat with him on the curb. My brother and dad had finally gotten out of the van, but were struggling to move my mother. You see, she's not a particularly small woman, so the struggle was real. So they left her there. But it was for a good reason. There were several gallons of water back in the van, and they used them to douse the flames. We were on a road somewhere in North County. It was 2 lanes, twisty and windy and dark. A row of houses backed up onto it, and lights started to come on inside of them. A door opened, and I heard a voice. "Are you okay? I can't believe this happened again." I looked up to see a couple, a man and a woman, standing on their balcony, butt naked. My almost 11-year-old brain could not compute what I was looking at, mainly because at that age, the very few naked bodies I had ever seen were a lot darker. They desperately tried and failed to wrap one silk sheet around the both of them. It would go up and immediately come down. After a second, it seemed like they weren't even trying anymore. They just let it all hang out while inquiring about our status as accident victims. I couldn't stop looking at them until I was distracted by the sound of a large truck approaching. At first, I thought it was a fire truck, but it wasn't. It was a UPS truck. Finally, someone wearing clothes who could help us out. The driver left the truck running and slowly stepped down from his rig, wearing the iconic brown uniform. The UPS guy looked around, reached down, grabbed my mother's purse off the ground, tucked it under his arm, got back into his truck, and left, maneuvering through the wreckage. And when it was clear he wasn't coming back, I thought to myself, you have got to be kidding me. This a-hole just stole my mother's purse. The purse had $600 in it, and that handset to my mom's favorite cordless phone. Not cell phone, the cordless phone. The one with caller ID. I have no idea why it was in her purse. My last memory of that morning included a life flight helicopter landing on the road. They took my dad and little brother. Older brother and I shared an ambulance to the hospital. I woke up to Disney's Pocahontas playing on TV. We were in the hospital only for the rest of the morning. My dad for a couple more days. They had to stop his kidneys from bleeding. Little brother had a concussion and a skull fracture. The nurses said they'd never met a kid more adamant in pulling out his wires and tubes. After 2 days, he was sick of it, they were sick of it, and they let him go. Mom was in the hospital for 1 full week getting patched back together in a series of surgeries. She had broken ribs, a collapsed lung, broken shoulder bone, and severely damaged nerves in her arm. She later underwent years of physical therapy to regain the use of her right hand. 20 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars later, and she's still in pain. Losing the $600 didn't bankrupt us, but medical bills did. Dad's shiny new job didn't come with enough benefits, and we were horribly underinsured. None of the other two drivers who caused the accident were insured at all. Just like that, we were poor again. We had tasted the middle class for all of 1 year. The fancy Christian academy was replaced with mail-order homeschooling because Mom was having a hard time chasing baby brother around and needed our help. We fought to stay caught up in school. We had to grow up quickly and learn how to run the house. At 11 years old, I could hold a baby on my hip while making lunch, doing laundry, and fetching Mom's pain pills with Maury and Jerry Springer on TV. We had to take care of each other. Dad still had his job, but the accident screwed our finances. There were no sports teams or leagues. Music lessons were a foregone thought, and I hated it. I hated the accident of robbing me of those things. The rest of the 90s sucked. Despite it all, we remained close. We still had Saturday night family slumber parties, where we'd fold out the sofa bed, pile on, and watch The Sound of Music, following it up with Coming to America. I don't think we even realized the irony of an actual African family watching and thoroughly enjoying Coming to America. We didn't go on big vacations, but my parents made sure to give us the option of having giant blowout birthday parties in our backyard. We didn't have school friends, but we had plenty of church friends. My brother's heavy metal band would play until a neighbor called the police. Then we'd move the party inside, moving all the furniture out of the way and blasting Dad's fancy stereo. The 90s had given way to the 2000s. The new Pink, Lil' Kim, Maya, and Christina version of Lady Marmalade had just dropped, and my Sweet 16 turned into a dance party. With my parents still somewhere in the house, 40 teenage suburban church youth group kids booty danced and sang, Voulez-vous coucher avec moi ce soir? Which loosely translates to, do you want to sleep with me tonight? Not much could shake my family anymore. Not older brother's rebellious street racing phase. Not younger brother's rebellious skater phase. Not my gentle middle kid steps out of the closet. 20 years later, they still live in that same home in the Vegas suburbs, itself a symbol of us having made it through the worst thing that's ever happened to us as a family. And when the UPS man rings the doorbell, and Mom sees that brown uniform, she still glances at the spot where her favorite cordless phone used to sit.
First time on the VAMP stage, Fidi Mwero.